and welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, jubilation as 104 of the 110 schoolgirls abducted from a college in Dapchi, Yobe State regained their freedom. 5 of the students reported dead from trauma. Nigerians ruling APC applaud the release of abducted schoolgirls as PDP demands probe of circumstances surrounding the abduction. House of Representatives reacts to recent killings in Kogi State, demands action from federal government to stop the bloodbath across the country. And suspect linked to series of deadly parcel bombs in the US city of Austin identified.
On business news tonight, organized private sector is looking to dialogue after Africa's historic trade deal signing takes place without Nigeria.
In sports news, 4 Nigerian clubs get tough opponents in the final qualifying round of the CAF Confederation Cup.
And from Abuja, National Assembly announces plans to pass the 2018 appropriation bill on April 24th.
We begin tonight with the return of 104 of the 110 girls kidnapped from Government Science and Technical College Dapchi in Yobe State on February the 19th. 5 of the girls are reported to have died as a result of trauma, while one of them was not released by the insurgents. The return of the girls has thrown Dapchi town into jubilation.
Jubilation all the way. It's the joy of having their sisters back after spending some 30 days in Boko Haram captivity. The mothers are also waiting anxiously to welcome their girls back home. But then not every one of them received the good news. This woman's daughter is said to have been the only one still in captivity because she refused to accept the terms of converting to the religion of the terrorists. A story that has put her sister in coma and their mother in confusion. The girls returned home in a new uniform, looking rough and weak, but obviously happy to be back home. One of them, Khadija Grema, tells the story of the abduction.
That fateful day, we were ready for dinner when we heard shootings. Then one of our teachers was calling and directing us to go out through the gate. When we ran into the insurgents at the gate, they gathered all of us in the pretense that they wanted to rescue us. As we continued to move into the bush, they asked for those who were fasting among us. Then they served us drinks, meat and food, after which we said our prayers and continued the journey. We crossed several rivers and streams and into one house where we lived until when we were brought back home. But to be honest, we were treated well. They didn't torture us as they treated us well throughout our stay in captivity. They didn't do us anything, and their major language is Kanuri and Arab. There were no whites among them, as all of them are Africans. We didn't know why they brought us back, but they told us we are Muslims and we share the same faith, and they didn't want us to suffer. 5 of our colleagues died of heart attack and stress as a result of the long trip. They didn't allow us close to them, neither did they subject us to any molestation of any kind of sexual harassment. One of the girls was held back on religious ground. She's a Christian and refused to denounce her religion.
Their parents are grateful to the government for bringing their daughters back. They had spent several sleepless nights waiting anxiously for their return and putting government under huge pressure.
I thank Almighty Allah for the safe return of our girls, and we thank all those that helped in one way or the other for the safe return of our girls, most especially President Muhammadu Buhari for all he did towards their release. For those that died, may they continue to rest in perfect peace.
It's a thing of joy, and we thank all and sundry for their prayers which led to the
the release of these girls. The President did assure us of their safe return, and that has manifested today. We really thank him.
I was shedding tears a few days ago, but today I am laughing and feeling happy for the release of these girls. I was an eyewitness to all that transpired as the insurgents came to town, waving their flags and asking the youth not to run away as they are coming to Dapchi with peace and love.
The girls have been made to undergo different medical checks at the General Hospital, even as Dapchi town gets back to life. Residents now expect the abduction saga will never repeat itself as they rely on the promise of better security by the government.
And before the start of the Federal Executive Council meeting, President Muhammadu Buhari today deployed a delegation led by the Minister of Information to Dapchi right after the news of the release of the abducted schoolgirls broke. After the meeting, the President's spokesperson, Mr. Femi Adesina, gave reasons for the President's last-minute decision to back down on the signing of the African Continental Bill. Our correspondent Gloria Umezuke reports.
Few hours after news broke of the release of the abducted Dapchi schoolgirls, Federal Executive Council delegation, including the Ministers of Information, Interior and Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, were seen outside the chambers, heading for Dapchi. Just before their departure, the Minister of Information shed more light on the release.
The report we got was that one condition that the insurgents gave was that they will be the one to drop the girls, and they dropped them in the early hours of this morning. That's all we know.
How did that become so easy?
It was agreed that there will be no force, there will be no confrontation. So that's why it was possible for them to drop the girls. It's part of the agreement that we release the girls, will not use any violence, will not have competition. And don't forget that the lives of these children are much more important to us than any cheap military victory.
In a joint briefing after the Council's meeting, the President's spokesperson, Mr. Femi Adesina, explained reasons why the President backed down from signing the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement in spite of approval from FEC.
He said the country was yet to fully understand the economic and security implications of the agreement. So there has to be further consultations with the different stakeholders. And the final position was that a committee be set up to meet and review the contents of that proposal, and they will do it within 2 weeks and get back to the Federal Executive Council.
Minister of Finance equally revealed that over 1.2 trillion naira has been released as capital budget for 2017, while up to 7.8 billion naira and other sums have been paid to whistleblowers.
But not all of this have we paid on, because some we still have to wait for the legal process. 7.8 billion naira, $378 million, £27,800. And that includes the cases that you know about and one or two that you don't yet know about. But some of them are still being worked through.
Meanwhile, the federal government is assuring that in about 12 months, 18 agencies under the United Nations should resume work at the UN building, which was attacked in August 2011 by terrorists. Its council approved 6.97 billion naira for full security furnishing of the building. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
In the meantime, the Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, has been speaking on the circumstances surrounding the abduction of the Dapchi girls by Boko Haram terrorists. The minister, who was briefing journalists in Maiduguri, where he led a delegation to receive the girls, said no ransom was paid for their release.
We have been in negotiation with this faction of insurgents for quite a while. And one of the understandings was that while we negotiate towards total cessation of hostility, there will be no abductions. So for us It was a moral issue. The government, led by its negotiators, reminded them of the agreement that there will be no abduction, that they've breached that agreement. And that's why there was no swap, there was no money paid. Any other story to the contrary is false. What happened was that the insurgents said they were going to unconditionally return the girls themselves to rejoin their families. So when they came, they dropped one of the girls in Gaida and dropped the rest in Dapchi. Now, when they dropped them in Dapchi, many of the girls went to their parents' houses. So it took this morning to call them together and get an accurate number of how many of them have been returned.
Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed. And federal lawmakers from Yobe State in the Senate have also been reacting to the release of the Dapchi schoolgirls. The Senate leader, Ahmed Lawan, who represents Yobe North, says the return of the girls is a huge relief for the people of his state. While another lawmaker, Senator Muhammad Hassan, says the federal and state governments must learn lessons from the abduction of the Dapchi girls and ensure that this incident does not happen again.
There must be a lot of background work done by the security agencies, and we must commend them for those efforts. What is very important now is to see that as a lesson and the way forward, to ensure that measures are taken to forestall similar situation. I've said this many times that in my state this wasn't the first time. It happened like 4 or 5 times. Schools have always been targets of the insurgents.
For us in Yobe State, it's a huge and massive relief because we were distressed when the girls were abducted. And I've heard over the news that the federal government has already sent a very powerful delegation to go to Yobe State, in Dapchi in particular, to receive the girls that were brought back or recovered. That is a huge, huge moral booster, not only for people, those of us from Yobe, but for the entire nation, and it's a huge and massive relief. And also as a government, you can see how effective we can be.
In the meantime, the ruling All Progressives Congress is optimistic that the federal government will secure the release of the remaining Chibok girls abducted by Boko Haram terrorists in 2014. The party says the prompt release of the Dapchi schoolgirls is a strong demonstration of the political will of the present government to secure the lives of all Nigerians. A statement by the party's National Publicity Secretary, Bolaji Abdullahi, says, quote, "If the immediate past People's Democratic Party had responded with the same alacrity, the Chibok schoolgirls would have been released or rescued. Instead, the PDP wasted several weeks wallowing in denial and conspiracy theories, such that it was now left for the APC government to rescue many of the girls and rehabilitate them." End of quote. The party is also giving Nigerians the assurance that the current administration will remain committed to securing the release of the remaining Chibok schoolgirls still in captivity. While the main opposition party, the People's Democratic Party, believes the story of the Dapchi abduction and the release of the 104 girls is gradually being politicized by the ruling party. A statement from the PDP's National Publicity Secretary faults the president's comparison of the Dapchi abduction with the 2014 Chibok school incident, describing it as a move to score cheap political points. The statement says, quote, "Nigerians can recall how the presidency deployed a team of officials led by the Minister of Information and Culture to Yobe State, ostensibly for a media stunt, which followed was the release of a false rescue report by unknown individuals, and then statements sponsored by groups praising the presidency for illusionary swift rescue operations." End of quote. The party is, however, asking the National Assembly to launch an independent inquest into the Dapchi abduction and make its findings public. In part 2, after the break, more on the release of the abducted Dapchi girls. I'll be joined by the chairperson of the Bring Back Our Girls group, Florence Sozo. That's in a moment. Please join us again.